Look at yourself, Mira. You're essentially expired goods." Vincent laughed, tossing the divorce papers onto the mahogany desk. "Camilla is the future. You're just a placeholder I kept around too long." He thought he had won. He thought stripping her of her home, her name, and her dignity was the end of the story. But Vincent Hale forgot one crucial rule of the universe. When you burn a bridge, make sure you aren't standing on it. He planned a night of passion with his mistress, but he was about to walk into a nightmare of pure golden revenge. Storybody. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was louder than the thunder rattling the windows of the penthouse. It was a Mont Blanc fountain pen, a gift Mira had bought Vincent for his 40th birthday just 3 months ago. Now he was using it to sign away their 15-year marriage. Vincent Hale sat back in his leather chair, checking his reflection in the darkened window. He adjusted his silk tie, looking at Mira Dane as if she were a stain on his pristine carpet. "Don't look so tragic, Mira," Vincent said, his voice smooth, lacking an ounce of empathy. "This was inevitable. You've been stagnating. I need a partner who reflects my trajectory, someone with vitality." Mira sat opposite him, her hands trembling in her lap. She wore a simple grey dress, the colours of her life seemingly drained away. "Stagnating," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Vincent, I quit my job at the gallery to run your mother's estate. I managed your schedule, your diet, your life so you could focus on the firm. I built this life with you." Vincent scoffed, standing up to pour himself a glass of whiskey. He didn't offer her any. "You managed a household, Mira. Any maid could do that. Camilla understands the industry. She understands networking. She's vital to my image at Hale Dynamics." "She's your secretary, Vincent," Mira said, a spark of anger finally igniting in her chest. "And she's 22. "She is 24, Vincent corrected sharply. "And she makes me feel alive. You make me feel tired." He tossed the papers across the desk. They slid to a halt, right at Mira's fingertips. The bold header, "Dissolution of marriage," stared up at her. "The terms are generous," Vincent continued, checking his Patek Philippe watch impatiently. "You get the townhouse in the suburbs and a stipend for 2 years. After that, you're on your own. I'm keeping the penthouse, the portfolio, and the cars, obviously." Mira looked at the man she had loved since college. His handsome face, once warm with ambition, had hardened into a mask of greed. He wasn't the man who used to share instant noodles with her in a cramped studio apartment. That man was dead. "I don't want the townhouse," Mira said softly. Vincent raised an eyebrow. "Oh, going to play the martyr and live on the streets?" "I want the stocks in the Project O startup," she said. Vincent barked out a laugh. "Project O? That failing tech dumpster fire. Mira, be serious. The shares are worthless. I was going to write them off as a tax loss this quarter." "Then let me have them," she insisted. "Give me the worthless shares and I'll sign right now. I won't ask for alimony." Vincent's eyes narrowed. He was a shark, always looking for the angle, but he couldn't see one here. He knew the financials. Project O was a sinking ship. If she wanted to strap herself to an anchor, why should he stop her? It would save him thousands in monthly alimony payments. "Fine," he sneered, grabbing the pen and scribbling an amendment in the margins. "You want the trash? Take it. Just sign the damn papers. Camilla is waiting for me downstairs in the Aston Martin. We have a dinner reservation at Le Bernardin." The mention of the restaurant, where Vincent had proposed to Mira, stung like a physical slap. But Mira didn't flinch. She took the pen. The weight of it felt cold. She signed her name, Mira Dane, reclaiming her identity with every stroke of ink. "Done," she said, standing up. She didn't look at the papers again. "Good," Vincent said, already turning away to grab his coat. "Leave your keys on the table. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." Mira walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the brass handle. "Vincent," she said. He sighed, exasperated. "What? You think you're trading up?" she said, her voice eerily calm. "But you're just trading gold for glitter. Don't be surprised when it fades." Vincent laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "Goodbye, Mira. Have a nice life." She walked out into the hallway, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind her. It was the sound of a prison cell opening, not closing. She took the elevator down, bypassing the lobby to avoid seeing the silver Aston Martin DB11 parked out front. She walked out the side exit into the pouring rain. She had no umbrella. The water soaked through her dress instantly. She clutched her purse to her chest, shivering. She had no home, no husband, and a portfolio of worthless stocks. But as the rain washed away the hairspray and the makeup, Mira felt something strange. She felt light. 3 months later, the reality of liberation felt more like starvation. Mira was living in a studio apartment in Queens that smelled perpetually of boiled cabbage from the neighbor's unit. The generous stipend Vincent had mentioned turned out to be legally tied up in escrow due to a clerical error his lawyers were taking their sweet time to fix. She was surviving on savings that were rapidly depleting. She sat on a second-hand futon, staring at her laptop. The screen displayed the stock ticker for Project O. It had dropped another 2% today. "Come on," she whispered, tapping the screen. "I know you're in there." Mira wasn't just a housewife. Before Vincent, she had been a rising star in art valuation and asset management. She had an eye for potential, for seeing value where others saw ruin. She had studied Project O for months before the divorce. It wasn't failing because the tech was bad. It was failing because the management was incompetent. They had a patent for a renewable energy algorithm that was revolutionary, but they were marketing it as a gaming optimization tool. She needed a job, but at 38, with a 15-year gap in her resume, the doors weren't just closed, they were bolted. Her phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Application rejected. That made 10 this week. She sighed and opened a new tab. She navigated to the website of Thorn Enterprises. It was a global conglomerate run by the enigmatic Julian Thorn. They were known for aggressive acquisitions and luxury branding. They were hosting an open recruitment drive for a junior analyst, an entry-level position meant for 22-year-olds fresh out of Harvard. Mira applied. In the cover letter, she didn't list her household management skills. She wrote a single paragraph analyzing Thorn Enterprises' recent acquisition of a French vineyard, pointing out exactly why their rebranding strategy would fail in the Asian market unless they adjusted the bottle design to reflect specific cultural color theories. It was a gamble. It was arrogant. It was her only shot. 2 days later, she received an email, not from HR, but from the office of the CEO. "Mr. Thorn requests your presence. Tuesday, 9 a.m. Do not be late." Tuesday morning, Mira wore her last good suit, a navy Chanel vintage piece she had saved from the purge of her closet. She stood in the glass and steel lobby of the Thorn Tower, feeling painfully out of place among the sea of young men in sharp suits and women with perfect blowouts. When she was ushered to the top floor, the atmosphere changed. It was quiet here. The air smelled of teakwood and old money. The assistant, a severe-looking woman with glasses, opened the double doors. "He will see you now." Julian Thorn was standing by the window, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair graying at the temples. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him with the precision of armor. He turned around. His eyes were a piercing, icy blue, contrasting sharply with his dark features. He didn't smile. "Mira Dane," he said. His voice was deep, resonant. "The woman who thinks my marketing team is incompetent." Mira swallowed her fear. She stood straighter. "I didn't say incompetent, Mr. Thorn. I said culturally myopic. There is a difference." Julian's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile, or a grimace. He walked to his desk and picked up her printout. "You predicted a 15% loss in the Asian sector if we proceeded with the gold leaf labeling. Why?" "Gold is prosperous, yes," Mira explained, her confidence returning as she spoke about the subject she loved. But the specific shade you chose, that pale yellow, is associated with mourning in certain regional dialects of design. You need a deeper ochre gold, and the font. It's too aggressive. It clashes with the harmony branding of the vintage. Julian stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "You have a 15-year gap," he stated bluntly. "I was managing a private estate," Mira lied smoothly. "Technically true." "You were married to Vincent Hale," Julian corrected. "I know him. Mediocre man. Loud suits." Mira flinched. "I am not my ex-husband." "No," Julian agreed, stepping closer. "You seem to be smarter than him. He sold his shares in Project O, didn't he?" Mira froze. "How did you know?" "I watch everything, Ms. Dane. I saw the transfer. He dumped the stock. You picked it up." "Why?" "Because they have the algorithm," Mira said, locking eyes with him. "They just don't know how to use it. If they pivot to green energy logistics, that stock will triple in 6 months." Julian held her gaze. For the first time, she saw a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. He wasn't looking at a middle-aged divorcee. He was looking at a strategist. "I don't need a junior analyst," Julian said, tossing her resume into the trash can. Mira's heart sank. "I see. Thank you for your I need a consultant for special assets," he interrupted. "Someone who sees what others miss. You start tomorrow. The salary is triple what the analyst position offered, and Ms. Dane..." "Yes." "Get rid of the Chanel suit. It's last season, and you're better than that. My stylist will be at your apartment at 7:10 a.m. 6 months passed. The transformation of Mira Dane was not sudden. It was a relentless polishing of a diamond that had been covered in soot. Working for Julian Thorne was exacting. He demanded perfection. He would call her at 3 a.m. to discuss the valuation of a Renaissance painting or the acquisition of a failing tech startup in Silicon Valley. Mira never complained. She absorbed everything. She worked 18-hour days, fueled by espresso and a burning need to prove that she existed. Her prediction about Project O came true. Under her subtle guidance, she had anonymously emailed the board a restructuring plan. The company pivoted. The stock she held, once worthless, had skyrocketed. She wasn't a billionaire, not yet, but she was suddenly a woman of independent means. She moved out of the smelly apartment in Queens and into a sleek modern loft in Tribeca. But she didn't buy a car. She didn't buy jewelry. She reinvested everything. Meanwhile, Vincent Hale was enjoying the loud, flashy life he had craved. Vincent sat in the VIP section of a trendy club, the Gilded Lily. Camilla was dancing on the table, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon Rose Gold, a $50,000 bottle that Vincent had put on the company credit card. "Vinny, look at me!" Camilla shrieked, spinning around. Her dress was barely there, a shimmering scrap of silver fabric. Vincent smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He took a sip of his drink. He was tired. Camilla was exhausting. She demanded constant attention, constant gifts. Last week, she had crashed his Aston Martin into a fire hydrant because she was trying to live stream while driving, and business was tricky. Project O, the stock he had dumped on Mira, was making headlines. He tried not to think about it. Fluke, he told himself. It's just a bubble. "Babe," Camilla hopped down, landing in his lap. She smelled of cloying vanilla perfume and sweat. "Did you get the invites?" "What invites?" "The Obsidian Gala," she whined. "Everyone is going. It's at the Ritz next week. It's hosted by Thorne Enterprises. If we go, we can network. I need to be seen there, Vinny. My followers are asking." Vincent stiffened. The Obsidian Gala. It was the most exclusive event of the decade. Tickets weren't sold. They were granted. "I'll make some calls," Vincent grunted. "Thorne is a competitor, but he respects me. Professional courtesy." He didn't mention that his last 3 calls to Julian Thorne's office had been blocked. Back at Thorne Tower, the atmosphere was electric. The Obsidian Gala was Julian's pet project, a charity event to unveil his new clean energy initiative, powered in part by the tech from Project O. Mira walked into Julian's office. She was wearing a structured black dress that hugged her curves, her hair cut into a sharp, chic bob. She looked nothing like the woman in the grey dress. She looked dangerous. "The guest list is finalized," she said, placing a tablet on his desk. Julian looked up from his paperwork. His eyes lingered on her for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "Excellent. Did you include Mr. Hale?" Mira paused. "I assumed you wouldn't want him there." "On the contrary," Julian stood up, walking around the desk to stand in front of her. "I think it is essential he attends. He needs to see the future he threw away." Mira looked up at him. Over the last 6 months, their relationship had shifted. It was professional, yes, but there was an undercurrent of tension, a shared understanding. They were two people who had been underestimated by the world. "Are you doing this for me?" Mira asked quietly. "I don't do things for sentimental reasons, Mira," Julian said, though his voice was softer than usual. "I do them for strategic advantage. Having Vincent Hale there, watching him squirm while his competitors outpace him, that is good business. It weakens his resolve." He reached out, his hand hovering near her face before brushing a stray hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm. "But," Julian added, his voice dropping an octave, "if it also happens to provide a moment of satisfaction for my best asset, then that is a bonus." Mira felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "He's bringing his mistress." "Let him," Julian said, his eyes darkening. "Bring a circus, and you still look like a clown. You, however, you will be the main event." "I'm just the consultant, Julian." "Not that night," he said firmly. "That night you are my partner. I want you by my side when we announce the acquisition. I want everyone to know exactly who is responsible for Thorn Enterprises' new success." He stepped back, the moment breaking, but the air still sizzled. "Go home, Mira. Rest. You need to be ready. Next week we go to war, but we do it in black tie." Mira walked out of the office, her heart hammering against her ribs. She pulled up the guest list on her tablet and found Vincent's name. She hesitated, then hit approve. She added a note to the digital invitation, "Table 44, near the kitchen." A petty smile touched her lips. She was done being the victim. It was time to show Vincent Hale exactly what $1 billion looked like. The air inside the Harry Winston boutique on Fifth Avenue was chilled to a precise 68 degrees. A temperature designed to keep the clientele comfortable and the diamonds crisp. Vincent Hale, however, was sweating. He sat in a plush velvet chair, tugging at the collar of his shirt. Across from him, a jeweler named Henri, who possessed a mustache so waxed it looked like a weapon, was presenting a tray of rings. "This one," Henri purred, pointing to a pear-shaped yellow diamond, "is the canary's cry. 4 carats. VVS1 clarity. It screams opulence." "It screams yellow," Camilla whined from beside Vincent. She was scrolling through Instagram on her phone, barely looking at the tray. "I wanted the pink one, Vinny, like J.Lo had, or maybe an emerald. Yellow makes my skin look sallow." Vincent gritted his teeth. "The pink one is $3 million, Camilla. This one is—" He glanced at the price tag and his stomach did a somersault. 300,000. "It is distinctive," Vincent said, forcing a smile. "It shows character. Besides, it matches your energy, bright, sunny." He wasn't buying the ring because he loved her. He was buying it because his PR team had told him his image was tanking. The divorce had been quiet, but rumors were swirling in the financial district that he had lost his lucky charm. His last 2 mergers had fallen through. He needed a spectacle. A public proposal at the Obsidian Gala would dominate the social pages. It would paint him as a romantic, a man of passion, distracting investors from the red ink on Hale Dynamics' quarterly report. "Fine," Camilla sighed, snapping a photo of the ring without even putting it on. But you promise we're sitting at the head table. I need good lighting for the video. I told you. I made calls. Vincent lied. He handed his black Amex to Henry. As the jeweler walked away to process the card, Vincent felt a vibration in his pocket. It was a text from his accountant. Sir, the liquidity in the offshore account is low. If you make a large purchase today, we might default on the warehouse lease next week. Vincent deleted the text. He would fix it later. Once the Project O bubble burst, and he was sure it would, any day now, he'd buy the tech back for pennies and flip it. He just needed to maintain the illusion of power until then. 5 miles away, in a private suite at Atelier Versace, the atmosphere was very different. There were no price tags here. There was only the soft rustle of silk and the murmur of appreciation from the seamstresses. Mira stood on a pedestal in front of a trifold mirror. She was wearing a gown that seemed to be woven from the night sky itself. It was a deep, midnight blue velvet that cascaded off her shoulders, hugging her waist before flaring out into a dramatic train. The fabric was dusted with thousands of tiny Swarovski crystals that caught the light with every breath she took. "It is aggressive," Mira whispered, touching the fabric. "Is it too much?" "It is not enough," a deep voice said from the doorway. Mira turned to see Julian Thorne leaning against the frame. He had bypassed the waiting area. He walked into the fitting room with the confidence of a man who owned the building, which in fact he did. He circled the pedestal, his eyes critical but appreciative. "You look like a weapon, Mira. A beautiful, dangerous weapon. That is exactly the point." "I feel like I'm wearing a house," Mira joked nervously, smoothing the velvet over her hips. "Vincent used to say I looked washed out in dark colors." Vincent was colorblind to anything that didn't have a dollar sign attached to it, Julian countered. He signaled to one of his assistants, who stepped forward carrying a flat velvet box. "I didn't want you to wear your own jewelry tonight," Julian said. "It felt insufficient." He opened the box. Mira gasped. Inside lay a necklace that looked heavy, just sitting on the velvet. It was a cascade of sapphires and diamonds centered around a stone the size of a pigeon's egg. "This is the Star of the Adriatic," Mira breathed. She knew the piece. It was part of the Thorne family heritage, rumored to have been worn by royalty in the 19th century. "Julian, I can't wear this. It belongs in a museum, or on your wife." The room went silent. The seamstresses pretended to be very busy with their pins. Julian looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "My wife passed away 10 years ago, Mira. She loved this piece because she said it reminded her of the ocean. It hasn't been worn since." He took the necklace out, the gems clicking softly. He stepped up onto the pedestal behind her. Mira felt the cold metal against her skin, then the warmth of his fingers as he clasped it at the nape of her neck. "You are wearing it," Julian whispered near her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "Because tonight you are not just my consultant. You are the proof that I was right, and I like to show off my victories." He stepped back, and their eyes met in the mirror. The blue of the sapphires matched the intensity of his gaze perfectly. "Do not cower tonight, Mira," he commanded softly. "Stand tall. Let them see what they lost." The night of the Obsidian Gala, the sky over Manhattan broke open. It wasn't just rain. It was a deluge, a curtain of water that turned the streets into rivers of oil and neon reflections. Vincent's evening began to disintegrate before he even left his penthouse. His Aston Martin was still in the shop. Parts were on back order from Italy, so he had ordered a limousine service. But due to the weather and a mix-up with the booking agency, which he blamed on his new assistant, a terrified girl named Sarah, the car that arrived was not a stretch limo. It was a Lincoln Town car, a reliable, boring airport shuttle sedan. "I am not getting in that," Camilla shrieked, standing under the awning of their building. She was wearing a dress made of pink tulle that looked less like high fashion and more like an exploded cupcake. "It looks like an Uber, Vinnie. Just get in," Vincent snapped, shoving her into the back seat to avoid getting his tuxedo wet. "It's raining, Camilla. No one will see the car." They sat in silence during the ride to the Ritz-Carlton. The windows fogged up. The air conditioning was weak. Vincent checked his phone incessantly, looking for the seating chart confirmation. He still hadn't received it. Probably a surprise, he told himself. Thorne likes drama. When they arrived at the Ritz, the chaos was palpable. The main entrance was jammed with Rolls-Royces, Maybachs and Bentleys. Flashbulbs popped like strobe lights, illuminating the celebrities and titans of industry walking the red carpet under a massive heated tent. The town car driver, intimidated by the line of supercars, pulled toward the secondary entrance, the one usually reserved for hotel guests and staff. "What are you doing?" Vincent barked. "Go to the main drop-off." "Police have it blocked, sir," the driver said. "Only vehicles with the gold permit." "I am a gold permit," Vincent yelled, but it was useless. They were ushered to the side door. There was no red carpet here, just a wet sidewalk and a valet who looked bored. Vincent stepped out into a puddle, soaking the hem of his trousers. He opened an umbrella, but the wind inverted it instantly. Camilla screamed as the rain plastered her bangs to her forehead. "My hair!" she wailed. "Vinnie, do something! Walk!" he ordered, grabbing her arm. They scurried into the side lobby like wet rats, bypassing the photographers entirely. No one took their picture. No one asked who they were. They checked their coats. Camilla was shivering and pouting, and made their way to the check-in desk at the entrance of the grand ballroom. The hostess, a woman with immaculate posture, scanned their digital invite. "Ah, Mr. Hale," she said, her tone polite but distant. "And, guest. You are at table 44. 44? Vincent frowned. "There must be a mistake. I'm supposed to be near the front. Mr. Thorne and I are colleagues." "Table 44 is the assignment, sir," she said, already looking past him to the next guest. Vincent grabbed Camilla's hand and stormed into the ballroom. It was a sea of black ties and designer gowns, lit by thousands of floating candles. It was breathtaking. He scanned the room for table 44. He walked past the stage, past the VIP section, past the bar. He found it. Table 44 was in the back corner, directly next to the swinging double doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter burst out with a tray of fish, a waft of steam and clattering dishes hit the table. The other guests at the table were the +1s of junior accountants and a few freelance journalists. "You're joking," Camilla hissed, sitting down and wiping rain from her shoulders. "We're sitting with the help." Vincent was shaking with rage. This was a deliberate insult. Thorne was mocking him. He was about to march to the front and demand a manager when the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the main entrance, the one Vincent hadn't been allowed to use. The orchestra swelled. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer boomed, "please welcome your host, Mr. Julian Thorne." The double doors swung open. Julian walked in, looking like a king in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He exuded power. The room broke into applause, but then the applause faltered, shifted, and grew louder. Confused whispers rippled through the crowd, because Julian wasn't alone. On his arm was a woman. She was stunning. The midnight blue velvet dress moved like liquid around her. The diamonds at her throat blazed under the spotlights. She walked with a grace that made the supermodels in the room look clumsy. Her chin was held high, her expression serene and regal. Vincent squinted. He knew that walk. He knew the curve of that neck. But it was impossible. The woman turned her head slightly to acknowledge the crowd, and the spotlight caught her face. Vincent's glass of whiskey slipped from his fingers. It shattered on the floor, splashing onto his patent leather shoes. "Mira?" he whispered. "Who is that?" Camilla asked, staring jealously at the necklace. Is that a celebrity? That's my wife, Vincent mumbled, his brain short-circuiting. Ex-wife, a man at the table corrected him. And buddy, I think she just won the breakup. The dinner service was a blur of agony for Vincent. He couldn't taste the truffled risotto. He couldn't taste the filet mignon. All he could do was stare at the center table, table 1, where Mira was seated next to Julian Thorne. She was laughing. She was leaning in to whisper something to the mayor of New York, who was nodding enthusiastically. She looked important. "Stop staring, Vinny," Camilla snapped, sawing at her steak. "It's embarrassing. So she got a sugar daddy. Big deal. You have me." Vincent looked at Camilla. She had spinach in her teeth. She was scrolling on TikTok under the table. She was talking about her subscriber count. Suddenly the vitality he had prized so much just looked like immaturity. The stagnation he had accused Mira of now looked like composure. "I need to talk to her," Vincent muttered. "You are not going over there," Camilla hissed. "We have the plan, the proposal. Remember, you're going to do it during the dessert course. The waiter is bringing the cake with the sparklers." "Forget the damn cake," Vincent snapped, causing the freelance journalist next to him to jump. He needed to gauge the situation. He needed to know if Mira was vindictive. If she was sleeping with Thorne, she might poison his business deals. He needed to smooth things over, remind her of the good times. He stood up, adjusting his jacket. "I'm going to the restroom." He didn't go to the restroom. He weaved through the tables, moving toward the front of the room. He felt the eyes of his peers on him. Some whispered, some smirked. They knew. In this circle, everyone knew everything. He approached table 1 just as the dessert wine was being poured. Julian saw him first. The billionaire didn't look surprised. He looked bored. "Vincent," Julian said, his voice carrying over the low hum of conversation. "I see you found your seat. Was the draft from the kitchen manageable?" Mira turned slowly. Up close she was even more breathtaking. The lines of worry that had defined her face in the last years of their marriage were gone. Her skin glowed. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and completely devoid of the adoration he was used to. "Hello, Vincent," she said. Her tone was polite, indifferent, like she was greeting a distant cousin she didn't particularly like. "Mira," Vincent said, trying to summon his old charm. He rested a hand on the back of her chair, a possessive gesture. "You look expensive." "I am," she replied coolly. "Self-made wealth usually is." "Is that what we're calling it?" Vincent chuckled, glancing at Julian. "Sleeping your way to the middle?" The table went silent. The mayor put down his fork. Julian didn't get angry. He smiled, a terrifying shock-like expression. He stood up, towering over Vincent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian said, his voice projecting without a microphone, silencing the nearby tables. He picked up a spoon and tapped his glass. The entire ballroom quieted down. "If I could have your attention," Julian announced. He gestured to the stage. "I believe it is time for the keynote address. I was originally going to give this speech regarding the launch of our new green logistics division, but I realized that the credit belongs to the architect of the project." He turned to Mira and offered her his hand. "Ms. Dane, the floor is yours." Mira stood up. She didn't look at Vincent. She walked past him, her velvet train brushing against his legs like a physical dismissal. She took the stage. Vincent was left standing there, awkward and exposed. He couldn't walk away now. He was frozen. Mira adjusted the microphone. She looked out at the sea of faces. 500 of the most powerful people in the world. "6 months ago," Mira began, her voice steady and clear, "I was told that I was stagnant. I was told that my value had expired. I was told that in a world of rapid innovation I was just a placeholder." She paused. Her eyes scanned the room and locked onto Vincent, who was still standing by her table like a lost child. But in finance, as in life, we often mistake volatility for value, she continued. We chase the shiny, the new, the loud. She glanced briefly toward table 44, where Camilla was waving a sparkler that a confused waiter had just delivered. We forget that true wealth is built on stability, on vision, on the ability to see potential in what others have discarded. She clicked a remote. The massive screen behind her lit up. It showed the growth charts for Project O, now rebranded as Viridian Systems. The curve was exponential. This technology was considered trash by some, Mira said, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. It was written off, abandoned. But under the umbrella of Thorn Enterprises, and with the correct strategic oversight, it has become the backbone of our new logistic network. As of this morning, Viridian is valued at $400 million. A gasp went through the room. Vincent felt the blood drain from his face. 400 million. He had given it to her. He had literally written it into the divorce decree to save a few $1,000s in alimony. So, Mira concluded, raising her glass, here is to the discarded, to the underestimated, and to the trash that turns into treasure. May you all have the wisdom to know the difference before you sign it away. The room erupted in applause. It was a standing ovation. Julian was the first to stand, clapping loudly, his eyes beaming with pride. Vincent couldn't move. He felt like he was suffocating. The applause sounded like thunder, like the storm outside, like the laughter of the gods. He looked back at table 44. Camilla was filming the applause for her story, oblivious to the fact that the woman on stage had just destroyed their financial future. Vincent realized, with a sickening jolt, that the night wasn't over, and the karma Mira had promised wasn't done with him yet. The applause had long since faded, replaced by the polite murmur of 500 wealthy guests digesting both their crème brûlée and the scandal they had just witnessed. For Vincent Hale, however, the noise in his head was deafening. It was a mixture of panic, whiskey, and the high-pitched whining of Camilla Rowan. 400 million, Camilla hissed, her nails digging into the tablecloth of table 44. You told me she was broke. You told me she was living in a box in Queens. You said you gave her trash. Keep your voice down, Vincent snapped, wiping sweat from his forehead with a linen napkin. It's a valuation, Camilla. It's paper money. It doesn't mean she has cash in the bank. It means she has more than you, Camilla shot back, grabbing her clutch. You can't even get your car fixed, and she's up there wearing a necklace that probably costs more than your entire company. Vincent glared at her. The vitality he had left Mira for was now revealing itself as pure, unadulterated avarice. But he couldn't deal with Camilla now. He needed damage control. He needed to get to Mira before she left the building. He saw movement at the front of the room. Mira was descending the stage stairs, Julian Thorne's hand gallantly supporting her elbow. They were surrounded by a phalanx of admirers, CEOs, tech moguls, even the governor. Stay here, Vincent ordered Camilla. He pushed his way through the crowd, ignoring the glares of people he bumped into. He was a man drowning, and Mira was the only life raft in sight. He intercepted them near the exit of the grand ballroom, just as they were heading toward the private elevators. "Mira!" Vincent called out, his voice cracking slightly. The group parted. Julian stopped, his expression hardening into stone. Mira turned, her face impassive. Up close, the star of the Adriatic around her neck seemed to pulse with cold blue fire. "Mr. Hale," Julian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous baritone. "I believe the valet is that way." He pointed toward the service exit. "I need to speak to my wife," Vincent said, puffing out his chest, though he felt incredibly small next to Julian. "Ex-wife," Mira corrected, her voice light as if she were clarifying a minor clerical error. "And I think we've said everything we needed to say in court, Vincent." "Mira, please," Vincent said, changing his tactic to desperation. He stepped closer, smelling the faint scent of jasmine and rain that clung to her, a scent he used to take for granted. This presentation, it was a masterstroke, truly. But you know the industry. Evaluations fluctuate. You need someone who knows how to manage that kind of asset, someone with experience. Mira tilted her head, a small, pitying smile playing on her lips. Are you offering your services, Vincent? Because my portfolio is currently being managed by the top analysts at Thorn Enterprises. I recall you saying that my management style was stagnant. I was angry, Vincent lied quickly. I didn't mean it. Look, we built a life together for 15 years. You can't just throw that away for him. He gestured vaguely at Julian. He's using you, Mira. He just wants the tech. Julian stepped forward, forcing Vincent to take a stumble back. Careful, Vincent. You are dangerously close to slander, and unlike you, I don't settle out of court. Mira placed a calming hand on Julian's arm. She looked at Vincent, and for a moment he saw a flicker of the woman who used to make him coffee every morning. But then the steel doors slammed shut behind her eyes. You're right, Vincent, she said softly. We did build a life, and you burned it down because you got bored. You wanted excitement. You wanted youth. She glanced over Vincent's shoulder to where Camilla was aggressively vlogging her own breakdown near the dessert table. Go back to your excitement. I have a board meeting in the morning. She turned to leave, but Vincent lunged, grabbing her wrist. You owe me, he snarled, the mask slipping completely. That stock was marital property. You tricked me into signing it over. I'll sue you. I'll tie this up in court for years. The silence that followed was absolute. Julian didn't move, but his eyes signaled the security detail standing discreetly by the wall. Mira looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his eyes. She didn't pull away. She just stared at him with an intensity that made him flinch. Let go, she whispered. Or what? Vincent challenged, though his grip loosened. Or, Julian interjected, I will have you arrested for assault in front of the governor, the mayor, and the editor of the Wall Street Journal. And then I will make it my personal mission to ensure that Hale Dynamics is audited so thoroughly they'll be counting the staples in your desk drawer. Vincent released her as if burned. Mira smoothed her glove. And, Vincent, you might want to check the fine print of that divorce decree you were so eager to sign. Specifically, Clause 14, Section B, regarding future liabilities and intellectual property transfers. You didn't just give me the stock. You gave me the indemnity. You're not just out of the money. You're out of options. She turned and walked into the elevator with Julian. The doors slid shut, severing Vincent from the only good thing he had ever had. The unraveling of Vincent Hale's life did not happen all at once. It happened in a series of agonizing, bureaucratic clicks, like a roller coaster inching over a precipice before the drop. The morning after the gala, Vincent stormed into his office at Hale Dynamics. He was hungover, his tuxedo shirt was stained, and he hadn't slept. He screamed for his secretary, but she wasn't at her desk. Instead, a man in a grey suit was sitting in Vincent's leather chair. "Who the hell are you?" Vincent roared. "Get out of my seat." The man stood up calmly. "Mr. Hale, I'm Arthur Pym, legal counsel for Viridian Systems." "Viridian?" Vincent blinked. "That's Mira's company. Get out. I'm calling security." "Security has already been briefed," Pym said, opening a briefcase. "I'm here to serve you with a cease and desist order." Vincent laughed, a dry, hysterical sound. "For what? Being mean to my ex-wife?" "For patent infringement," Pym said, sliding a document across the mahogany desk. Hale Dynamics' core product, the predictive shipping algorithm you sell to the government, is based on source code that was part of the Project O acquisition. When you transferred the shares and all associated assets to Ms. Dane, you transferred the ownership of that code. Vincent froze. The room seemed to tilt. He remembered the hurried meetings, the way he had dismissed the tech team's concerns about the code origin, assuming he owned Project O anyway, so it didn't matter. "But I developed that product," Vincent stammered. "Using assets you no longer own," Pym corrected. "Ms. Dane is now charging you a licensing fee for the continued use of her property." "Fine," Vincent slammed his hand on the desk. "I'll pay the license. How much? 10,000 a month? 50? Pym adjusted his glasses. "Retroactive to the date of the divorce decree, plus penalties for unauthorized use. The fee is set at $2 million a month, or a lump sum settlement of $50 million. Vincent collapsed onto the visitor's sofa. "I don't have 50 million liquid. You know that." "We do," Pym agreed, "which is why we are also prepared to accept a liquidation of assets, specifically the majority controlling stake in Hale Dynamics." Vincent stared at the ceiling. It wasn't just a defeat. It was a hostile takeover from the inside out. Mira hadn't just beaten him. She had eaten him alive. He stumbled out of the office an hour later, stripped of his title, his company, and his dignity. He drove home, not in the Aston Martin, which was still held hostage by the mechanic for unpaid bills, but in a taxi. When he arrived at the penthouse, he expected to find solace, or at least a drink. Instead, he found the front door wide open. The hallway was filled with boxes, but they weren't being unpacked. They were being moved out. "Camilla!" Vincent called out, panic rising in his throat. Camilla walked out of the bedroom. She was wearing her coat and dragging a Louis Vuitton trunk. She wasn't crying. She looked annoyed. "Finally," she said. "I've been waiting for the Uber for 20 minutes. This building has terrible reception." "Where are you going?" Vincent asked, blocking her path. "I'm leaving, Vinny," she said, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "I saw the news. Stocks tanking. Lawsuits. You're toxic. My brand can't be associated with a loser." "Your brand?" Vincent laughed incredulously. "You take selfies for a living. I paid for this apartment. I paid for that bag." "And thanks for that," she said, breezing past him. "Consider it severance pay for putting up with your snoring." "Wait." Vincent grabbed her arm. "The ring, the yellow diamond. Give it back. I need to return it. I need the cash." Camilla pulled her arm away, holding up her hand. The finger where the canary's cry had sat was empty. "Oh, that?" she shrugged. "I pawned it this morning. Needed first and last for my new place in Soho. Don't worry, I got a good deal." You stole it," Vincent gasped. "It was a gift," she smirked. "Possession is 9/10 of the law, baby, just like you taught me." She walked out the door, the wheels of her trunk clicking rhythmically over the marble floor. Vincent stood alone in the empty penthouse. The rain had started again outside. He walked to the window, looking out at the city he used to think he owned. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. Foreclosure notice. Payment default on penthouse mortgage. He slid down the wall, sitting on the floor where Mira used to do yoga. He looked around at the cold, empty space. He had traded a woman who would have walked through fire for him for a woman who sold his ring to pay rent. He had traded a billion-dollar future for a few months of ego. He put his head in his hands, and finally he wept, not for Mira, but for himself. 1 year later, the summer sun beat down on the rusty metal of the shipping container. Vincent wiped grime from his forehead with the back of a gloved hand. He adjusted his hard hat. "Hale, stop daydreaming and check the manifest," the foreman shouted from the dock below. "On it," Vincent grunted. He was working as a logistics coordinator, a fancy title for a guy who checked clipboards at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. It was ironic, really. He was working in the very industry his former company had tried to revolutionize. Now he was just a cog in the machine. He lived in a small one-bedroom apartment in Jersey City. He took the PATH train to work. He ate sandwiches wrapped in foil. It was a humble life, a quiet life. It was the life he had once mocked Mira for living. He finished checking the container and walked toward the break room. A discarded newspaper was sitting on the bench. He usually ignored the business section. It was too painful. But today, the headline caught his eye. Thorn Dane. Merger redefines global energy. There was a photo. It was taken on the deck of a yacht, the Amalfi Coast glittering in the background. Julian Thorne was there, looking as imposing as ever in white linen. And next to him, laughing at something he had just said, was Mira. She looked radiant. She wasn't just a wife or a partner. The caption identified her as CEO of Viridian Thorn Global. She held a glass of champagne, her other hand resting casually on Julian's shoulder. On her finger, the star of the Adriatic had been replaced by a simple, massive diamond band. They were married. Vincent stared at the photo. He looked at Mira's smile, a smile he hadn't seen in the last 5 years of their marriage because he had been too busy looking at his phone. He felt a pang of jealousy, sharp and hot. But then it faded into something duller. Resignation. He looked at his own reflection in the break room window. Grey hair, tired eyes, a high-vis vest. "Hey, Hale!" A co-worker, a young kid named Mike, sat down next to him. "You see this? That lady, she's the one who invented that system we use, the one that tracks the crates." "Yeah," Vincent said hoarsely. "I know." "Must be nice," Mike sighed, biting into an apple. "Billions of dollars, yachts. I bet she never had a worry in her life." Vincent looked back at the photo. He remembered Mira crying at the kitchen table when he told her she was boring. He remembered her signing the divorce papers with a trembling hand, asking only for the worthless stock. "No," Vincent said quietly. "She had worries. She invested in the right things eventually." "You know her?" Mike asked, joking. Vincent hesitated. He could tell the kid the truth. He could say, "I was her husband. I was the one who threw her away." He could try to claim some proximity to that greatness. But he looked at the grease under his fingernails. He looked at the life he had built with his own arrogance. "No," Vincent said, tossing the newspaper into the recycling bin. "I don't know her. Not really." He stood up and put his hard hat back on. "Back to work," he said. Outside, across the water, a massive white yacht was pulling out of the harbour, heading toward the open ocean. Vincent didn't watch it go. He turned his back, picked up his clipboard, and started counting the boxes he would never own. Vincent thought the grass was greener on the other side, but he forgot that grass only grows where you water it. He traded a diamond for a stone and paid the ultimate price. Mira didn't just get revenge, she got a life that Vincent could only dream of. It's a brutal reminder. Be careful who you discard on your way up, because you might just meet them on your way down, and they won't be offering you a hand. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate karma and redemption, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. We drop new stories of betrayal and justice every week. What would you have done if you were Mira? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.